So in the middle of the screen, I have a tier list, and around the tier list, I have every single undefeated fighter that's on the UFC roster. There's about 30 of them that I was able to find, and I'm going to be grading them from S all the way down to D. I've never done a tier list before. I haven't done one on the channel before, but I thought it would be a pretty fun idea to kind of grade every single undefeated prospect in the UFC. I do want it to be known, though, if I'm putting someone at D, that's not a bad thing. That's not meant to be an insult at all. I mean, they're undefeated for a reason. They're fantastic fighters and they're in the UFC. But I'm going to be trying to grade it somewhat fairly based on what they've accomplished in the UFC, who they've fought in the UFC, how close are they to the rankings, how close are they to a title shot, especially when we get up to the top of the rankings on this little tier list here. But with that being said, now let's get into the first fighter, and I'm just going to pull out a random one from the side here. And the first one is Michael Morales. 14-0, very, very young, or maybe he's 13-0, but I believe he's 14-0, actually fighting this weekend. He's taking on Max Griffin, who's going to be a very tough test for him. I think he might slide into C tier. I think he has a lot of potential, but right now, I wouldn't say he's the best fighter in the world, but he's got so much potential. I think he's a C tier undefeated prospect. The next fighter is Narelo Iliev. I tried to say fighter in person simultaneously. I think he's also a C tier level prospect. He's only had one fight in the UFC, but it was against Rafael Alves, and we know that Rafael Alves is a tough fight for anybody. He had a dominant Dana White's Contender Series fight. He was one of the first fighters from Tajikistan to come into the UFC. He's paved the way for a lot of other Tajikistan fighters to be signed to the UFC. I think he's a C tier prospect. He's a very, very good fighter. The next one is going to be Vitor Petrino. Vitor Petrino is a light heavyweight prospect. He does have one win over the UFC over Anton Turkalj. He had a great win on Dana White's Contender Series, won by KO, but his fight with Anton Turkalj was pretty sloppy. It wasn't really the best performance we probably could have seen from him, so I am going to put Vitor Petrino down at D tier, but I do think Vitor Petrino is a guy to keep your eye on. He's very young, good light heavyweight prospect, could maybe make it far in the promotion, but for now, he's D tier on my list. Another fighter I'm going to put at D tier, to the surprise of many, is Daniel Marcos. Now, Daniel Marcos is actually 14-0. So Daniel Marcos has a really, really good record. However, the people that he has beaten isn't really the highest level of competition. He's 1-0 in the UFC against Simon Oliveira, but that was just a really, really good stylistic matchup for him because Oliveira is a pure grappler with not a lot of striking. Marcos has a very tough test ahead of him, taking on Davy Grant in London. But if he can get past Davy Grant, he's a legit guy to look out for, and he probably would move up all the way to C tier, because that would be a great win. The next one is going to be Jamie Lynn Horth. I'm going to put Jamie Lynn Horth down at D tier. She come in on short notice, upper weight class, and beat Hayley Cowan. However, we don't really know how good Hayley Cowan is, and we don't really know how good Jamie Lynn Horth is. Sorry, but it is worth noting that is a really good win, especially to have on short notice upper weight class, but she's only 1-0 in the UFC. It'll be interesting to see how far she can take her career, but for now, I am going to put her in D tier once again. Absolutely no disrespect to her whatsoever. The next fighter is Bruno Ferreira. Now, I'm going to put Bruno Ferreira. I'm going to put him in C tier, actually, because he fought Gregory Rodriguez and beat Gregory Rodriguez on short notice, and he's a very entertaining fighter. However, I'm actually picking Nursultan Ruziboyev to win against him, and that is this weekend. However, I could look like an idiot, and then Bruno Ferreira could just knock him out in the first rounds. But Bruno Ferreira, I'm going to put him in C tier, just because of that quality of win that he did have on short notice was over Gregory Rodriguez, who is just a really good fighter in his own right. So I'm going to put him at C. You could maybe argue that he's a D tier prospect, but I'm going to put him at C. He's 11-0, 11 finishes. Actually, I'm kind of talking myself into putting him at C. The next one is Tatiana Suarez, A tier prospect in my opinion, A tier undefeated fighter. I think that she's potentially a future champion. You know, unfortunately for Tatiana Suarez, she's had many, many years away due to injury. She didn't look incredible against Montana De La Rosa, but her next fight is going to be against Jessica Andrade. And if she can beat Jessica Andrade, she's probably next in line for the women's strawweight title, maybe just behind Yan Xiaonan. But Tatiana Suarez is definitely a potential future champion, and I am going to put her all the way up at A tier. I think she's close to a title shot. She's already beaten fantastic fighters like Carla Esparza in the past, and Nina Nunes as well, I believe. So I can put her confidently in A tier. The next fighter is Azamat Mirzakhanov. I'm going to put him at B tier. He's ranked. He's 3-0 in the UFC, I believe. I think he just recently beat Justin Jacoby, which is a great win because that was a pretty bad stylistic matchup for Murzakanov because Dustin Jacoby was just the taller guy, a former Glory kickboxer, and in my opinion, I thought he was going to be the better striker against Murzakanov, and Murzakanov went out there and beat Jacoby. Very good win for Azamat Murzakanov. I think that he can potentially go on to do big things. He is pretty old for an undefeated prospect, I guess you could say, but he's definitely still on a good run. Has looked very good since he got signed into the UFC. The next fighter I'm going to bring up is going to be Bo Nickel. Interesting one. A lot of people might disagree with me on this placement, but I'm just going to put him at B tier as well. And the reason why I'm putting him at B, although you could maybe argue that he's got a skill set to be higher, Bo Nickel still is just yet to prove something in the UFC. He's got 2 wins on Dana White's Contender Series. He absolutely dominated Jamie Pickett within a round with a submission. However, we still don't quite know where Bo Nickel really stands in the rankings. I know a lot of people might want to put him higher. I think B is a very fair rating for him. At the end of the day, he is only like 4-0 as a professional. He's taken on Tresean Gore at UFC 290. I do think he gets past Tresean Gore, but even then, I still think he's got a little bit more to prove before he can get up into that A tier of an undefeated fighter. But do let me know what you think of that placement in the comments below. The next one is Lerone Murphy. Now, Lerone Murphy, I'm going to put Lerone Murphy as a C tier because a lot of people thought that he actually lost his last fight against Gabriel Santos, and then Gabriel Santos just got KO'd by David Onama. However, Lerone Murphy is still a fantastic fighter. He's a great 11-0 prospect. You know, he's fighting as well July 22nd against Joshua Culibao. That potentially could be a pretty tough matchup for him, but I'm going to put him as a C-tier prospect. He's already got a lot of wins in the UFC. He's already proven himself to be a good fighter. I'm going to put him at C-tier. However, I do think, as well as many other people, that he potentially did lose that matchup to Daniel Santos. The next fighter is Movsar Evloev. Movsar Evloev is a very interesting case because he has looked really, really good until he fought Diego Lopez. Diego Lopez really tested him. But I am going to probably still put Movsar Evloev at A tier, but like a borderline A tier in my opinion. He's 17-0. He's had a lot of wins in the UFC. He's had a lot of really good performances in the UFC. But I'm still going to put him at A tier because he is very highly ranked. Still at featherweight. You could maybe make an argument to put him lower, but once again, he has still proven himself to be a fantastic fighter in the UFC featherweight division, and he has beaten many ranked opponents already to defend that undefeated record. The next fighter is Clayton Carpenter. This is no disrespect to Clayton Carpenter, but Clayton Carpenter is only 1-0 in the UFC, and it was over Jan Camilo Ronderos. If you guys know anything about me, you know that I'm a big fan of Clayton Carpenter. I do genuinely believe that Clayton Carpenter can go on to do really good things in the flyweight division, but for now, he's only 1-0 in the promotion over Juan Camilo Ronderos. He did beat Juan Camilo Ronderos impressively, but I'm still going to put him at D tier. No disrespect to him, no disrespect to his skill set, but I am going to put him at D tier because he is only 1-0 in the UFC, and he still has a little bit more to prove because Juan Camilo Ronderos isn't the best fighter in the world. Now we've got on Ian Garry. Ian Garry is a great fighter, and I think Ian Garry is actually better than most people believe that Ian Garry is. And I actually am tempted to put Ian Garry quite high up in the list. But once again, Ian Garry, you know, throughout his UFC career, he's fought great guys. But most of the time, he has fought a lot of very good stylistic matchups, especially the first few matchups in the UFC. He did have pretty good stylistic matchups. However, he did go recently and just dominate Daniel Rodriguez. I think he's a B tier prospect. I think if he beats Jeff Neal, he's an A tier prospect because he will be in the top 10 of the division. So if he beats Jeff Neal, he's A tier. For now, I'm going to put him at B. And I think that's a pretty fair rating for the man that we are all very happy for in Ian Garry. The next fighter is Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar Nurmagomedov, very close to a title shot. I'm going to put him at A for now. But if this man beats Corey Sandhagen, he's S, is what I'm going to say. I'm going to put him borderline S tier, but at A tier for now. At the end of the day, he still hasn't really beaten any ranked opponents. He's got a great win over Raoni Barcelos, which he won by KO. But Raoni Barcelos isn't ranked. I don't believe Raoni Barcelos has ever cracked the top 10 in the division. But if he beats Corey Sandhagen, he is going to be an S tier prospect because Corey Sandhagen's a top 5 fighter, a guy knocking on the door of a title shot himself. And I think if Umar Nurmagomedov manages to beat Corey Sandhagen, he's going to be knocking on the door of a title shot. And I think he should be an S-tier prospect if he gets past Sandhagen. But for now, with what is currently accomplished in the UFC, I'm going to put him at A-tier. The next fighter is Anshul Jabli. India's only fighter in the UFC at the moment, but he has really been paving the way for a lot of Indian fans to maybe potentially become fighters themselves, because this man honestly gained like 150k followers in the Road to UFC tournament last year. So for that reason, I'm gonna put him at D tier. He is 1-0 in the UFC over Jekasaragi, who's just a pure striker, and Anshul Jubilee is a grappler, despite everybody picking Jekasaragi in that matchup because they thought Jubilee was a grappler, but that's for another day. That's a different story. I'm putting Anshul Jubilee at D. I don't really know how far he can go in the UFC, but I think there's definitely some winnable matchups out there for him. But I think Anshul Jubilee is definitely a guy that actually has a lot of potential. He showed a lot of potential on Road to UFC, and maybe with time you could see this guy go pretty far up and maybe put India on the map for as an elite UFC MMA country. But for now, I'm going to put him down at D. The next fighter, Yanal Ashmouz, knocked out Sam Patterson brutally. He's got a matchup coming up recently as soon as well, and I think it's a good matchup, and it's going to be in London, and it's going to be against a man from Scotland, Chris Duncan. I can't remember who it is. Yanal Ashmouz is 7-0, coming off that KO over Sam Patterson, but once again, he just is only 1-0 in the promotion over Sam Patterson, who's a great fighter himself, but I'm going to put Yanal Ashmouz down at D tier. No disrespect to Yanal Ashmouz. I do think if he knocks out Chris Duncan, you could definitely argue him to be C, but for now I'm just going to put him at D because he is, once again, only 1-0 in the promotion. And now I'm going to try and search for some more fighters because I do have more of them. We've got Aliaskhab Khizriev. Aliaskhab Khizriev, great fighter, 13-0. Does not fight often enough, and he annoys me because he doesn't fight often enough. This guy is so good, and he doesn't fight often enough. His one win in the UFC is over Denis Tialulin, but he's rumored to be fighting Jacob Malkoun, so maybe you could see Aliaskhab Khizriev maybe fight soon, but man, this guy does not fight often enough. I don't really know where his ceiling is because he's burning a lot of time. He's not fighting often, but I'm going to put Khizriev as D tier, only 1-0 in the UFC himself. The next fighter is Rinya Nakamura. Now, you guys have got no idea how much I want to put him at C tier. However, if I put him at C tier, I would just be completely being a hypocrite. So we're going to have to put him at D tier due to the reasons why I've put everyone else at D tier, because they haven't really proven themselves in the UFC yet, as they're only 1-0. But my goodness, do I want to put this guy at C. I think this guy is a future champion, and I did put Bruno Ferreira at C tier, but that was because he beat Gregory Rodriguez. You know, Rinya Nakamura beat, I believe it was Toshiyama Kazama in his UFC debut. I think he's got all the upside in the world. I do believe he's a future champion. He is that good. He's an incredible wrestler, a world wrestling champion, I believe, way back in the day. Fantastic boxer. However, due to my own criteria, I can't let my bias put him at C. I'm going to put him at D, although I am a massive fan of Rinya Nakamura, and I do believe he is definitely one of the future faces of the UFC's bantamweight division. Once again, another Road to UFC winner. We've got Hyun Sung Park. He also won last year, but he's a flyweight. 8-0. I believe he's coming off that win over Seungak Choi in the finals. I'm hoping to see him fight soon at UFC Singapore, maybe alongside Rinya Nakamura. But for the same reason I have put everyone else at D tier, I've got to put him at D tier as well. He still is kind of yet to prove himself as a C tier prospect alongside the more elite fighters in the tier list, if that makes any sense. Now we move on to the next one. We've got Gabriel Bonfirm. I'm going to be a hypocrite. I'm putting him at C tier. Gabriel Bonfirm is a really, really good prospect, man. I'm telling you guys, Gabriel Bonfirm is definitely one of the future fighters. Definitely a guy that really could crack the top 10. He is such a good fighter. He is only 1-0 in the UFC, but he submitted Munir Aziz in under a minute. He submitted Trey Waters in the first round. Trey Waters just come in and beat Josh Quinlan on short notice. I think Gabriel Bonfirm is a C tier, undefeated guy, even though he's only 1-0 in the UFC. I mean, I've got to put him at C tier, right? I think a lot of people would agree with that placement. We've got Javid Basharat. In my opinion, the better of the two Basharat brothers. Definitely a C tier prospect. I think he's borderline top 15 as well, so maybe he could be a B tier prospect one day. But for now, I'm just going to put him at C tier, and we're going to move on and see if we can find any more fighters. The next one is Cameron Simon. Cameron Simon's won a couple of times in the UFC. He's got a couple of impressive wins. He won one over Mana Martinez. He's also got one over, I believe it was Shobi Inobi won the pillow. Something like that. You guys know what I mean. I'm going to put him at C. I mean, I guess you maybe could put him at D because once again, Mana Martinez and the other guy that he fought, who I can only remember his nickname, aren't the best fighters in the world, but I'm going to put him at C tier. The next fighter is going to be Farid Basharat, Javid Basharat's brother. For the same reason I put everyone else at D tier, I'm also going to put him as a D tier undefeated prospect. However, just like Javid, he is a fantastic fighter. And now I'm trying to search and find the next fighter. Tatsuro Taira, C tier prospect in my opinion, from Japan, fantastic grappler, borderline top 15 fighter for sure. And I'm still kind of searching for everybody. Yasmin Yarigway, or Yarigi as everyone seems to be saying. I'm sorry, I've been saying her name wrong the whole time. C tier prospect, in my opinion, I'm going to put her at C. And then we're going to move on to Ilia Topuria. S tier prospect in my opinion. In my opinion, out of all of the undefeated prospects, probably the closest to a title shot, because Ilia Topuria could get a title shot now, and as soon as in September against Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 293. So I'm going to be going with Ilia Topuria as an S tier prospect. I do think that makes sense. The next one is Shavkat Rakhmonov. S tier prospect as well, in my opinion. I think Shavkat Rakhmonov should go at S tier, as well as Khamzat Chimaev. I think is also an S tier prospect. However, Khamzat Chimaev, where are you? Why are you not fighting? You could maybe even make an argument, because he's been fighting so little, to put Khamzat Chimaev at S tier. But I think this is a pretty good grouping of all of the fighters overall. I did kind of rush through to the end because I realized I've spent so much time talking about the fighters at the start, but I managed to get through every single fighter. Ilia Topuria, in my opinion, is an S tier prospect, because as I said, he could get a title shot right now. Shavkat Rakhmonov is one fight away from a title shot, maybe 2 fights away from a title shot. Khamzat Chimaev is probably only 1 fight away from a title shot himself, but where is he and what is he doing? He's ruined his career by not fighting often. This guy come in and fought everybody all the time very early on, and he just isn't anymore. It doesn't really make any sense to me, but let me know what you think of this tier list below. Let me know if you want me to do another tier list. I do understand that I think I wasted a lot of time at the start, and I think if I do another tier list, which I probably will, I will definitely not kind of mess that part up. But let me know what you think. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.